Hello, and welcome to Line and Mouse Commentary. I'm Holland, and this is my best friend Tori.
Hello.
If you're new to the show, we rank various forms of entertainment by different categories out of a total score of 10, with only 2 points allowed for our personal taste. Don't worry, we break everything down as we go. Feel free to agree, disagree, or just find something new to enjoy. Just be sure to tread lightly. There will be hot takes and spoilers. And cut to the intro. Alrighty, so today I chose the Cartoon Network miniseries Over the Garden Wall for us to review. This is actually blind to both of us. We did watch it together for preparation for this podcast, but prior to this podcast episode, neither of us had seen it or even really were familiar with it. This was actually recommended to us by one of our listeners, so if you have something you'd like to recommend for us to review, you can do that on our website or connect with us on our socials, so a little shout out there. So before we get into our scores, I'm going to do just some quick background information about this TV show. Technically, it's in the TV show category as far as we're concerned, but Over the Garden Wall, it's an American animated television miniseries created by Patrick McHale for Cartoon Network. The series centers on two half-brothers who travel across a mysterious forest to find their way home. They encounter a variety of strange and fantastical things on their journey. The show is based on McHale's animated short film, Tome of the Unknown, which was produced as part of Cartoon Network Studios' Shorts Development Program. Elijah Wood and Colin Dean voice the protagonists Wirt and Greg, and Melanie Linsky voices Beatrice, a bluebird. The series voice cast also includes Christopher Lloyd, Tim Curry, B.B. Newworth, I think that's how you pronounce it, Chris Isaac, Shirley Jones, Thomas Lennon, Jack Jones, Jaron Paxton, John Cleese, and Samuel Ramey. The soundtrack was composed by The Blasting Company, and it was broadcast as a miniseries through the week of November 3rd to November 7th, 2014. It was actually the first miniseries produced by Cartoon Network and to air on Cartoon Network. Production commenced in 2013. McHale initially envisioned 18 chapters in the series, but the episode count was brought to 10 to accommodate budget and time constraints. And I believe each episode is about 11 minutes long. Just a couple more background for you. McHale's original short, Tome of the Unknown, was screened at the 2014 Santa Barbara International Film Festival, where McHale earned the Bruce Corwin Award for Best Animated Short Film. It also received an honorable mention at the 2013 Ottawa International Animation Festival. At the 2014 San Diego Comic-Con International, a preview of the show was screened along with various panels for other shows on Cartoon Network. Episode 2 previewed at the 2014 New York Comic-Con, and McHale and the main cast was present for that as well. And then the show premiered on Cartoon Network on November 3rd, 2014, and ran over 5 consecutive nights. A couple accolades here for you. In 2015, it was nominated for 2 Annie Awards for Best Animated TV Broadcast Production for Children's Audience and Outstanding Achievement, Directing in an Animated TV Broadcast Production. Sorry, that was a bit of a mouthful. It won a Reuben Award. Patrick McHale won a Reuben Award for TV animation. It won... Over the Garden Wall won a Primetime Creative Arts Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program, and Nick Cross won Outstanding Individual Achievement in Animation in the Primetime Creative Arts Emmys in 2015. And then it also won Best Animated Feature at the Ottawa International Animation Festival. And then it was also nominated for a Teen Choice Award in 2016 for Animated TV Show. So there's a little background about the show. If you haven't watched it and you'd like no further spoilers, I recommend you go ahead and check that out and then come back and listen to it afterwards. But we're going to go ahead and kick it into the first category.
Okay, so first category for TV shows is plot, story, and cohesion, which includes resolution through a season. For 2 possible points, I gave this half a point.
That's really low for you.
It is quite low for me. I will talk about the positives first. This show is definitely reminiscent, and I would be surprised if it was not somewhat inspired by a show such as Adventure Time. If you've watched Adventure Time on Cartoon Network, that sort of like whimsical, nonsensical world, that whole process of world building in a world that really doesn't have many rules to it is present again in this series. Now, The dialogue is really funny. There's a lot of really strange humor that sort of doesn't really make sense. But honestly, I don't have a lot of great things to say about the story. It's confusing. First of all, we start the show with no context or info about these characters or the situation they're in or the world that they're currently present in. So it makes it very difficult to feel any sort of stakes or connection to the characters right off the bat. If I don't know what's going on, nor do I feel like I understand the process of the world that the characters are in, it's very hard for me to invest any level of care right off the bat. So that's really difficult. And like I mentioned that the dialogue was funny, and it is. I found myself laughing, but most of the time I was laughing because I literally did not understand what was going on. It was just, it's almost like laughing at the ridiculousness of it and not because the humor is like really, really funny. There are a couple instances where the dialogue is actually clever and funny, but most of the humor is just, this is so ridiculous. I'm laughing because it feels like I'm watching a clown show, not because it's like a well-built joke or something like that. Sudden slapstick appears that doesn't seem to make any sense. I feel like there is kind of a low level of consistency in how the story is told. It's like they try different things in episodes. And while I'm not necessarily opposed to that, there are lots of series that I like that have episodes that are very different than the rest of the episodes. But those are usually series that will have 24 plus episodes. And with this miniseries only having 10 episodes, with 6 or 7 of those feeling different than everything else, it feels disjointed. And like I don't really know how to put together each piece of the plot, which there really aren't that many pieces to put together. But the pieces that we do have to put together, it feels strange to do that because they all are presented to you so differently. Or just the, I guess for lack of a better term, the framework of each episode is different than how it was the last episode. And while that might be appealing to somebody who is very different than me, for me, I think it hurt more than it helped in the storytelling. The first indication that we get of any overarching story in this miniseries, and what I mean by that is a story piece that takes place in more than just one episode. The first indication that we have of any of that happening, other than the very vague premise of Wirt and Greg trying to get home, which, okay, I guess you could say that's from the beginning. But other than that, the first overarching story indication that we get is not until episode 4. And that's with the Beast and the Woodsman and the Woodsman's daughter's flame being present in the lantern that he carries. And that his deal with the Beast, the Beast of the Woods, I guess, is that he is to cut down these trees that the Beast gives to him, and then he uses those trees to create oil to feed the lantern. But 4 episodes out of 10 to finally get a piece of story that feels bigger than just what's the slapstick joke of the week is really late, I think. And I think if you had been watching the series, it's very easy to potentially get bored of this before you get to episode 4. So you may not even get to that point. And a number of these episodes don't matter at all. I think in order to get all the important story bits, this could be a 3 or 4 episode series instead of 10. And it's unfortunate because from what I understand, or like I think you mentioned, is that this was originally supposed to be 18 episodes. So 8 more episodes to get from the same point A to point B that we got in 10 episodes, and only 4 of those I think were technically relevant. Does that mean 6 plus 8 more? That's 14 episodes of filler in an 18 episode series is insane. So it's surprising to me that they condensed 18 to 10 and it still feels like there's way too much fluff. So I just didn't enjoy that. And big spoiler ahead, it was all a dream. I hate that trope.
Me too.
I hate that trope. And right when I started to kind of really love Wirt and Greg, which I guess it didn't diminish too much of their characters to me, but
the plot,
right when I was kind of like, okay, we've got some learning happening. We've got some character growth. We've got some changes happening in our characters. JK, they were all just knocked out in a cold river. It was a dream. And sure, they wake up, in the hospital, and it seems that both Wirt and Greg have the same memories of the place they were in. So you're like, okay, maybe it wasn't really a dream, but it was a dream, okay? And I hate that trope, and I am disappointed in the ending because of it. I really am. And I am never usually this harsh on stories. I really am not. I usually tend to be pretty lenient when we're talking about plot and story. But there really wasn't much. The half point that I gave it is really just from like the silly dialogue, like the parts that are supposed to be funny were funny. And I mentioned this when I was talking to Holland. I have watched both Adventure Time, like I've already talked about, and the show Gravity Falls. And I feel like both of those shows are kind of similar, but they do what they were set out to do way better than Over the Garden Wall does. Adventure Time sets out to be absolutely ridiculous and leans way hard into the campiness of that. And so it succeeds in being silly and ridiculous because it's not trying to give you any sort of serious plot. And Gravity Falls has these moments of levity and ridiculousness that kind of make you go, what does that mean? But all of those moments end up feeding into a much deeper and well thought out and clever plot. And Over the Garden Wall fails in that too. So I feel like if it was trying to do one of those two things, either deliver us a deep story or be crazy and ridiculous, it really doesn't succeed in either aspect. And so it just feels really messy. So I'm sorry, but I have to just give it 0.5 point out of 2.
That's a low blow coming from Tori over here.
I'm sorry. I know. Wow. I'm not usually this critical, but what did you do?
I also gave this 0.5 point out of 2.
Well, at least we're on the same page.
But that's not unusual for me because I am not afraid to score things really low. But yeah, I agree with the majority of what you've said is exactly the same reasons that I also gave this 0.5 point out of 2 possible points. I feel like most of the plot of this miniseries you could have fit into 3 episodes. Like it could have been a 30-minute short film instead of a 10-episode miniseries of 11 minutes apiece. It's just, I think that it's problematic when you have all these filler episodes that don't contribute to the overall plot, and then I'll kind of also touch into this in character. They don't contribute to character growth or development either. So it's not like these things are happening to our main cast and we're watching growth in characters as well. They're just things that are happening along the way. You kind of hooked me in at the beginning. You have this is the unknown, these concepts of these 2 kids being lost in the woods. Here are these strange, misadventures that they encounter along the way. They meet these weird people and there's an ominous danger in the woods that they need to avoid. And they're just trying to get home and they meet people along the way. Like all of that is all well and good. Like those are very common themes and plots. I mean, Hansel and Gretel is basically the same story. Yeah. And, here we have 2 half brothers and we're kind of doing a little Hansel and Gretel story. And, we just can kind of go in the door and accept that, this is going to be some like wild, wacky story. except that they start you off thinking, okay, here's the plot, and then the next like 3 episodes don't seem connected at all, just like you mentioned. Episode 3 in particular really feels like a weird change in tone, because I thought, oh, we're gonna watch like a spooky version of Adventure Time or a spooky version of Gravity Falls, and then episodes, I think 2 and 3 are both like really bright and like, oh wow, now it's just this like happy little adventure. And so it just tonally didn't seem like the episodes were connected, which I feel like could connect into aesthetics as well, but just plot wise, it didn't really fit either. I liked the concept, this kind of theme that if you lose hope, that's what keeps you trapped in the unknown or trapped in the woods or makes you vulnerable to the beast, is if you lose hope. And I liked that as a concept. I was like, oh great, they're really going to go this way. It's going to be a really character-driven drama. And then they didn't even go in that direction with the plot either. It was just kind of this throwaway concept. So even these like themes that are like really strong themes and really strong concepts in a plot that can be told in a very short period of time and can have, you can put any, I guess, like lens or filter of an aesthetic that you want over that plot and it works. They somehow managed to even not make it work. Also, I absolutely hate any plot where at the end of it you find out, oh, it was all a dream. Like, guess what? None of it was real. I hate that. I absolutely hate it. I think it's cheap. I think it's a cop-out. I think it's the author of the story didn't know what to do, and so they just, made it a dream at the end. I did like when episode 9, and it's a huge spoiler, but episode 9, it shows that these characters are actually from the modern world, and here's their real world that they live in, and here's why Wirt's wearing this weird looking, costume, and why Greg has a teapot upside down on his head, and like, actually it's Halloween, and oh, look, here it is. I thought that was great, except that we could have had that halfway through the story.
Yeah.
And then we could have also had...
even episode 1.
Yeah, even episode 1. We could have had things along the way that tied back into that plot and that story of like, oh, actually, these people they're meeting, it's like, it's done a million times. I can't think of a movie off the top of my head. Oh, like The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, okay.
Like the Scarecrow is actually this guy in the real world, and The Wizard of Oz does the biggest like it was all a dream ever, but it was the 1930s. You kind of give it a pass, like a little bit of a pass.
And also, I feel like it was probably one of the earliest significant pieces of media that used that trope, so I give them the pass.
Right. And so it's like you could have even had like, oh, actually the bluebird is actually really Sarah, or and so like these characters that you're meeting along the way are actually people in the real world, and so that's what makes sense that it's a dream. It's like metaphorical, and it didn't even commit to that either. So like all of these like really strong pieces of storytelling and media with the plot, they just cherry picked little tiny bits and pieces of it and didn't commit to any of it, and it just, like you said, it really just made it a mess. And then like even like little plot holes that I just kind of mentioned, like we kind of jotted down along the way. If like Greg tossed the pennies into the fountain at the end of episode 5 maybe, and then episode 6 they're on the ferry that they needed the pennies for.
Yeah, and the only explanation you get is one tiny throwaway line from Beatrice, and she's like, well, we snuck on.
Well, then why are you standing out in the middle of the open where everybody can see you?
Yeah, and like
you're not hiding. Like, so it's like, we snuck on the boat, and it's like, well, you're not acting like you snuck on the boat. Oh, you just baited and switched us. Like, haha, you were thinking about it, but not really.
You dumb viewer. Yeah.
When in episode 7 with the ringing of the bell, where Wirt uses the bell to make the spirit leave the girl Lorna, why didn't the aunt do that to begin with?
I know,
nobody thought of that. If it's commanding the spirit and not the girl, why didn't we do that to begin with? You could have saved a whole lot of trouble. When the whole point towards the end, when Wirt seems to lose hope, episode 7 with the ringing of the bell is the turning point in Wirt's story where he starts to lose hope. Why? Because this girl was saved and he could have left with her, but but that wasn't even like a motivation. So I know that's kind of character too, but it's like, why did he just all of a sudden start to lose hope and think they're never going to go home? We're never told that. You could have had it happen back in the episode when Beatrice betrays them. Oh, now he loses hope because his friend betrayed him. Like,
right.
Nope, we're not going to have him lose hope then. It's going to wait till episode 7, which has a happy ending at the end of the story anyways. So why is he now all of a sudden losing hope? Why does Beatrice say that she's going to take the kids to Adelaide, and at the end we find out she knows exactly where she is, but then why are they at the tavern asking for directions if she knows where Adelaide is? Why did we stop at the tavern to ask for directions? Just like all these little things along the way that's like, you didn't even think, like, weave your thread through the whole plot line to avoid these like inconsistencies. And it's like, I feel like some people are going to come at me and say, it's a kid's show. You need to stop overthinking kids' media.
We have talked about many pieces of media on this podcast alone, and there are plenty more outside that we haven't talked about. We have talked about, I would say, mostly children's and young adult media. Not all of our episodes, but a good majority of them are, and a lot of them are way more deep and clever than this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that kids' media is not an excuse to have a poorly
That's an insult
story.
To children. Children are smarter than you think.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And have the capacity to learn lessons and morals through good storytelling.
Right. So some of the positives I did like about the story. I liked the plot line about the woodsman. I liked the plot line about the beast. I liked the theme that losing hope is how you get trapped in the woods, and how the beast kind of gets you in his grasp. I didn't understand why Greg needed to get the honeycomb and the silver thread and get the sun in the cup. I feel like that is from some kind of mythical story. I feel like Maybe. I've heard that those items
like,
before.
That's like something. It sounds like something from like Aesop's Fables.
It does. It does. Like a honeycomb is the golden comb, and the silver thread is a spider web. I've heard that before. I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but it's like that had nothing to do with the plot. Like why did Greg do all of that? We don't know. It's just,
it kind of seems like maybe that the point of that was so that the last one with him capturing the sun in the cup, it was simply an excuse to get him to sit out in the snow and get too cold to like resist.
I guess so. But I guess you could say that.
Yeah, but I mean, it still seemed like a strange way to go about it because it seems like it would be something really significant. And I'm sure that the beast could have tricked Greg in any other way. He's kind of a silly child.
Right. He's pretty dumb. I think the one saving grace of the plot of this show is that it is brief enough that if you want to watch it, it's not a chore to get through. You're watching 10, 11-minute episodes. You're not watching, 10 1-hour episodes. That would be absolute torture, and I would not have reviewed the rest of this show if I had to watch that much content of this caliber. And that sounds so incredibly harsh, but I mean, it's not that it is an entertaining piece of media. I will give it that. It is mildly entertaining and interesting, but overall the plot is just so problematic. I couldn't justify giving it more than half a point. So that's why I did half a point out of 2.
Okay, so second category is characters. And out of 3 points, I gave this 1.5 points. I think, and a lot of this is going to hinge on the fact that I do think the casting is incredible. And the cast members that they got blows my mind. The voice acting is fantastic. And all of my positives come from the acting. All of my negatives come from how the characters are written. The casting is just simply insane. I think that there is I do like how Wirt and Greg are presented, and I like how different they are, but they're not such polar opposites from each other that it's like comical. I think it actually benefits the story that they are quite distant in age. I think that that's one of those sorts of things that's kind of beneficial for them and their relationship, especially toward the end. Now, the unfortunate thing is that nothing really significant happens between them as characters until like episode 8. And then it's like, I feel like it's a little too late at that point. They felt very stagnant up to that. Before that point, I think the most interesting character is Beatrice, and that's because she has that moment of betrayal in episode 5, but that's still halfway through the show before we get any sort of significant character like shift or surprise or something like that. Like that's really weird to me, I think. So do I think that Beatrice is kind of like the MVP of the show? Yes. Do I think she's a great character? I don't think she's a bad character. I think that she, along with Wirt and Greg, are stifled a lot. And it kind of goes back to the plot. But I think that the potential in these characters, they are great. They have the great potential to be great protagonists. And I feel bad for these poor kids because the episodes that I liked them the most were the last 3. And so those first 7 episodes, they just feel kind of flat and kind of boring. And then I feel like they shine in the last 3. So it's hard to talk about them really because everything great that I think they've done is in the like just the final moments of the show. I think it's kind of strange how Wirt, I think, is kind of presented as like your foremost protagonist, I guess you could say. And yet I feel like everything he does and says is either insignificant or falls on deaf ears. Isn't that strange for a protagonist? Like, if the idea of a protagonist, and I do believe this show has multiple protagonists. I consider Wirt, Greg, and even Beatrice protagonists. But in the case of your like main number one protagonist, isn't the idea that you're kind of supposed to be delivering the story and world building kind of through their eyes and perspective, even if it's not like thought for thought, you're seeing his perspective. And I think it's kind of strange that so many of his actions are inconsequential if he's kind of the one that's supposed to be leading you through the story. So I just found that very strange, and I didn't like that. I do like kind of seeing, I mean, I wish it had happened earlier, but you do start to see kind of a moral dilemma in Beatrice before her betrayal. And I think that makes it a more interesting betrayal. However, the betrayal resolution resolves in like 5 minutes. So it makes the, I guess, emotional weight of her betrayal diminished. And we don't really get as big of a moment of like, can we trust her? Why'd she do it? Do we give her the chance to explain? All of that is rushed and resolved so quickly because they have to move on to the next filler episode or whatever. And I just didn't care for that because I think it makes Beatrice kind of seem like she is more one-sided than she really is. It kind of made it seem like, well, she's the protagonist, so of course she's going to have a good reason. But that's not interesting. That's not the interesting way to have us discover her character. I would rather my trust in her be shaken for, I don't know, 4 more episodes and have her come in at the end again. But it resolves so quickly, and sure, they're kind of separated from Beatrice for a number of episodes, but as the viewer, you 100% understand that, like, she's really done nothing wrong. She was just trying to do her best. I don't want that. I want to have a level of mistrust in a character that I previously trusted. I want to feel like there is a level of redemption that has to be earned, and none of that is given to her, and I'm disappointed in that. A lot of the side characters are sadly very forgettable. It's hard for me to remember really any names. There's only a couple that I really remember outside of our main cast. The most interesting side characters are the characters in the real world situation. When we kind of get the flashback of like how Wirt and Greg ended up in or over the garden wall. And those characters are literally only present for like one episode. And then the final like 3 minutes of the last episode. So I just wish that the side characters, while the character designs are all very memorable and unique, and I want to give credit where credit's due, the actual characters themselves, since they serve so little purpose because so few of the episodes actually drive the plot and story, unfortunately all those characters also fall by the wayside because they're literally just here to entertain you for 10 minutes and then disappear into obscurity. The most terrifying characters, though, definitely turned out to be Auntie Whispers and Lorna, which I thought were cool characters. And again, the resolution is just so strange and quick, and there's no actual like character growth because the moments that we kind of see like, and you mentioned this a little bit in plot, is like there's like a weird shift in Wirt at that point. And it's like he has like a small moment in that episode where he's like cleaning with Lorna and he like looks up at her and like kind of blushes a little bit and you're like, what's that about? And it didn't matter in the end. So like the characters of Auntie Whispers and Lorna, who were terrifying characters that had a good resolution, like I thought the storytelling of their episode was fine, but the characters themselves become pointless, literally pointless. Because they just move on with their lives. It's not even like Lorna had any sort of lasting effect on Wirt, because by the start of the next episode, it's like they're forgotten. So I was being a little too generous, but I do think that the casting and the voice acting, everybody does so well with what they're given. The talent is insane. It's just the characters are weird and like they're thrown away so quickly, and that's just really the disappointing part. So that's why I just gave it half credit with 1.5 points.
Alrighty. Well, I think that's completely valid in crediting the actors and the voice acting in this with your score. I really didn't think about that when I was giving my score, but I do think you can't deny the cast is very talented. But so I gave this 0.5 point out of 3 for characters, and pretty much exactly for the reasons that you kind of already mentioned. Greg and Wirt and the Woodsman and Beatrice are kind of your main characters that actually affect the plot, I would say. And I feel like you had a really good start. Like, I thought in the first episode, when the Woodsman tells Greg and Wirt, he's talking to them, they're leaving, and he's telling them to leave. And Greg says something, I can't remember how it goes down, but Greg says something and Wirt scolds him and then blames Greg for his actions, like for their, faux pas that they have with the Woodsman. And the Woodsman says to Greg, no, you are responsible for him. You're the older brother. You are responsible for him and you need to take care of him. I was like, that is a great, character arc to set up.
Yeah.
For this show. I was like, that is going to be great, because and it's so rarely discussed in children's media that as the older sibling, not that you have control over your younger siblings, but as the older sibling in a perilous situation, most older siblings do take on that role of responsibility for their younger sibling, and they're, making sure that they're protected and safe. And
it's almost like an instinctual thing, or should be.
Right. And even if it's not, that you need to be responsible.
Yeah,
and
need
if
to
you're
step up.
But even not so much in taking care of your younger sibling, but as if your younger sibling does something wrong, you don't throw them under the bus and put them in harm's way. You step up and take charge of the situation and rectify things because you have more knowledge and you are more responsible and you understand the world better than they do. So if Greg says something stupid and somebody's coming at him, you're supposed to step in and help him take accountability and also take accountability and not just throw him under the bus as the scapegoat to take all of the brunt of
the blame,
the consequences. And I thought that was where the themes, like the character themes of Wirt and Greg's relationship was going to go, and we were going to watch these two brothers develop in their sibling relationship with each other. And then when they talked about how Wirt mentions that they're half siblings, like, okay, that's even more interesting because now you have this blending of a family and this newfound relationship that you have when, you know, in a kind of step-parent relationship. I thought you had some great setup here. And then the whole rest of the series goes nowhere with any of that. They had the chance to really move forward in that direction, and they don't. They don't do anything with that. So I was already disappointed that you set me up for a disappointment.
Yeah.
But, you know, Greg is just extremely stupid in this show, and I just find it so frustrating when you have children characters and one's like a teenager and one is, you know, maybe in elementary school or maybe early middle school, and they take the younger sibling and they're just a bumbling, idiotic buffoon that maybe sometimes gets things right, maybe sometimes doesn't, but they have no intention or purpose of being intelligent whatsoever. And I hate that. I hate that character trope. And I do, not to compare, but I do like the show Gravity Falls, and I'm sure a lot of people would come at me and say, well, that's what Mabel is in Gravity Falls. No, Mabel has her own character traits that contribute and are the yin to Dipper's yang in that relationship. And so there's purpose in that. Like her wackiness and goofiness and silliness, there's still intention behind that.
And I think the difference between Mabel and Dipper's relationship and Wirt and Greg's is that Mabel still contributes as much as she can to Dipper, and they solve problems together and execute them together.
Right. And so, not that this is going to turn into a Gravity Falls podcast, but that is not utilized in Greg. So Greg is this like goofy bumbling idiot who just talks about weird stuff and sings weird songs and then does nothing for the remainder of the story. Like, all he does is this goofy, wacky stuff, except that he, at the very end, tries to, like, in the last 2 episodes, you see him, like, trying to help his brother out, you know, trying to be a good, you know, companion to his brother and help him out. But the whole rest of the show, he's not doing any of that. So it's not like they've built this into his character. The relationship between Greg and Wirt really feels like you're just watching 2 separate people go through this plot line together, and they just happen to be next to each other. They're not really interacting with each other or growing or learning from each other. They just happen to be together. And I think that that's a problem when you have a sibling relationship as your protagonist. And even if they're not siblings, your main protagonist should be interacting and counteracting with each other, because that's part of being human, right? When you're going through anything alongside another human, you're going to have interactions with each other that cause you to grow and change in some way. That's what just makes life interesting and makes relationships interesting, and Greg and Wirt don't have that happen in this show.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge problem for your protagonist. Other things that you mentioned, I also contribute to the fact that I only gave this half a point. All of the side characters, the minor characters, so not counting our main cast, all of these minor characters in every episode generally have no contribution to the plot and no contribution to our main character's development. So why are they here?
Right.
Like they're completely useless. They're fun to look at. They're pleasing to look at. They do wacky stuff. They're weird because this world is weird, and that's it. And I think that's a problem.
The strange thing is that, like, I would say, like, without a doubt, the characters fit these episodes, but the episodes mean nothing. So, as a result, the characters mean nothing.
Right. And I think the most interesting characters in this plot, Beatrice is a fairly interesting character, and we slowly are learning more about her. You know, she's this talking bird, and she wants to help these two boys out, and then we find out she used to be human, and it's actually her fault that her whole family has been turned into bluebirds, and you know, so that's a very interesting character. And then that's about it. You know, there's this very stark severance of her from our main cast with her kind of betrayal, and then like you said, the resolution's so quick, it's not very satisfying. So you kind of already touched on that, and I agree with the majority of those plot points that you already made. And then also the Woodsman. The Woodsman's an extremely interesting character. I love that we have this, like, is he really the Beast, or is he not? Is he to be trusted? Can he not be trusted? We don't know. And then the whole concept between him and the Beast being this very deceitful, you know, evil, manipulative creature that has tricked, we finally find out he has tricked the Woodsman into fueling kind of the life force of the Beast, and thinking that he's keeping his daughter's soul alive. That's all very dark concepts, and it's very interesting, but we get all of that information and all of the character about the Woodsman probably in about 3 minutes of screen time. And I feel like if we had integrated more of that throughout the whole story, it would have just made for a more interesting plot, for one, and it would have made for a more interesting and kind of satisfying ending when we finally get to see that the Woodsman defeats the Beast at the end, you know. And instead we're just not, it just feels very unsatisfying to me. But I do think that aspect is interesting, and so I did give it half a point, mostly because I think that whole the character dynamic between the Beast and the Woodsman as your main villain and your potential villain, because you don't know that if the Woodsman's good or bad. You don't really know what he's up to. I do think that he's a very interesting character. I do think, and then also I gave half a point because I know you mentioned the dialogue being moments of very clever dialogue. I contributed that into the character aspect of it as well, rather than the plot aspect of it. So 5 out of 3. 0.5.
Got it.
0.5 out of 3. And I think most of it just is, you had some really good starting points, and then there's no follow through.
Okay.
So, half a point.
All right. So our third category is aesthetics, and out of 2 points, I gave this 1. I think they do some really cool things aesthetically. The unfortunate thing is that none of it is consistent except for the intro screen. And like, of course, like the general animation style doesn't change, but they try a lot of, and this kind of goes back to how I was talking about in the plot, how so many of the different episodes seem to be like styled differently. And so that happens a lot in the aesthetics. And I didn't love that it seemed like things were changing all the time. But I'll talk about things one at a time. So, the intro screen, interesting. Old storybook vibes I kind of got. But we noticed like third or fourth episode in that you have the screen, and it kind of looks like an old like movie theater screen or old storybook screen. And on the edges, you have all of these like round panels. And at the beginning of every episode, one of those panels is missing. And then when it goes to the next screen, which shows the name of the episode title, that round medallion or whatever it is that was missing from the previous screen is the one used to sort of, I guess, represent that episode, which I thought was a very interesting thing to do. I liked that. I also really liked the sort of ragtime feel to a lot of the score pieces. I just thought that was kind of like a fun choice. They use that quite a bit. The unfortunate thing is that the other score pieces that aren't ragtime are so different that they don't seem to even sort of fit in the same world together, which I just thought was kind of strange and makes the music feel a little jarring when it starts, because you don't know whether you're going to expect ragtime or something completely different. So a lot of my like critiques with the aesthetics just come with the inconsistencies. I think the visual style and animation is generally fun. I think the expressions for the characters are always really fun and funny. I think that character design for a lot of these weird characters is very, very good. Those sorts of things. Animation is fluid and done really well. Coloration is nice. Those sorts of things. But again, it's not consistent, especially with something like coloration. Now, I'm not talking about shifts in color palette to further storytelling, mood, or location. Those things I accept. But when you have a one-off episode of a bunch of animals that don't talk because they are regular animals in a schoolhouse with a teacher who spends all of her time complaining about her lost past love, who is actually the gorilla in the woods, that color palette is different than the other episodes. Why? It doesn't need to be. Like, it could stay the same color palette as the first episode and it would change nothing. So I don't understand that. I just feel like aesthetics are another piece of storytelling. It's not just your writing and it's not just your characters. And that's why we talk about aesthetics with every single thing that we do that's visual on this podcast, is because I truly believe that aesthetics are part of the storytelling. And if they're done poorly, it continues to muddle or confuse that storytelling. And I think that happens in this show, unfortunately. I also noticed multiple times that the sound mixing is weird. There was an instance where the main characters were talking, and then all of a sudden, it's not like the tone of their voice lowered so that you could tell they were trying to be quieter or trying to be like secretive or something like that. But all of a sudden, the volume of the dialogue was just quieter for like 2 lines. And then it jumped back up again. Makes me think those were re-recorded lines. Okay, that's fine. That happens in animation. That happens in real filming. You got to dub things over. But that's such an easy thing to catch and fix. You can't balance that with the rest of the already thrown in lines. Like, it seemed like a bad or lazy or not thorough piece of editing. And
it's not like this is an indie studio. This is Cartoon Network.
Exactly. So if I'm noticing that on multiple occasions in multiple episodes, that's an issue. Also, why is everything foggy in the tea mansion in episode 5? Did you notice that? Everything looks foggy, like it's out of focus. I genuinely thought my contacts were just giving me trouble, and I was like blinking. And then episode 6 started and everything was back to normal. So I was like, okay, well then it wasn't my eyeballs. They just decided to throw a foggy filter on everything. Episode 8 feels like Cuphead. We're watching, and I genuinely thought Greg died, okay, y'all? I was like, is Greg being taken to heaven? Helen had to explain to me, no, he's just having a weird dream. So he has this weird dream where he goes up to whatever, Cloud Town or whatever. And
Cloud City, I wrote it down.
It was. And like all the characters are weird and they're like smiling really strangely and kind of creepily, and everybody's like dancing, and there's like vegetable people and animals, and I'm like, why is this suddenly a level in Cuphead? I don't get this. Is this, and Holland asked, she was like, is this like a reference to some other piece of media? Is it an homage to something else? I genuinely have no idea. All I know is I don't understand why it looks like that when nothing else has looked like that. And it's not like it contributed. It's still, at the end of it still didn't contribute. And I think that's like our biggest gripe. And I think, Holland, tell me if you disagree, but my biggest gripe with every category so far is that there are so many pieces that simply don't contribute to the overall enjoyment or like delivery of story, which at the end of everything is your number one goal. And so many pieces in so many of these different categories, they simply don't like contribute well. And so that's why I have so many issues. Now, the reason I gave it 1 point instead of less than that is because I do think that the things that they do well, they do really well. I like the animation style. I like, the visual overall. I like the character design. I like the intro screens. I do like the ragtime music, and I think that's fun. And Holland complained about this, but I genuinely didn't have a problem about Holland complained about this while we were talking about it, or while we were watching it together. But I didn't have any issue with the fact that Greg likes to sing. I just accepted that as part of his character. He's like a young kid. I also make up songs, and I'm a full-grown adult. So I was just like, whatever. I don't care that Greg has made a song about everything so far and continues to sing it. Like, I guess I would kind of throw that into aesthetics because they are songs that were made. But I didn't have any issues with any of that. I thought that the things that they did well, they did really well. But there's just so much that doesn't need to be there or has no explanation for being the way that it is. And if I'm sitting there watching a show and all I can think is, why did they do that? Then they probably didn't need to do that. You know what I mean? And it's one thing to be like, why did they do that? And then have an answer for that come later down the pipeline. But if it's simply like, I wonder why they did that, and that's just a question that hangs in the air forever, it's just something that's harder for me to accept. So 1 point out of 2 for aesthetics.
Alrighty. Well, I actually gave this half a point out of 2 for aesthetics. I know I usually score aesthetics much higher than you. But I'll first address some positives. I do appreciate the animation style. The visuals in general are very stylized. They're and consistent in style. And by that I mean the drawing / structure of your characters all look very consistent with each other. So the humans all look like the same humans that should be in the same world. The animals look very similar to each other. These creatures and monsters that kind of show up, or your humans that are supposed to look more monstrous or creepy, still look like they all fit the world. And I do like the style. I like that the style of your characters and the style of your world also fits that kind of old-timey, like 1920s, 30s, 40s Disney style animation, kind of Adventure Time style, or even Cuphead style. And I looked just to see, because I was curious. And Adventure Time originally aired, I believe, in 2010. And Cuphead, the video game that has very similar style, came out in 2017. So you can't say that this show copied Cuphead, but it is very similar with Adventure Time, which is also a Cartoon Network production.
I guess then you could say that, like, those aspects, the Cuphead style aspects, because Cuphead was inspired by like old 1920s Disney animation and like animations around that time. So I guess you could say it was really more inspired by like that era.
Right. And so I think this has a lot of similarities in that same stylistic choice, and I do appreciate that. Although I do, to be fair, find that it, especially our main characters of Wirt and Greg, feel like they're very
inspired, reminiscent.
Yeah, but it feels like they're very, very similar in style to Jake and Finn in Adventure Time. I mean, you have a tall, skinny, more serious main character and a short, round, wacky side character. You know, I mean, but that aesthetic choice of a tall, straight man and a short, fat, you know, round shaped, funny man is been around forever. So you can't say it's, oh, they knocked off Adventure Time, but it is kind of tropey in that sense as well. I like the way that the title cards look, the cue cards, you know, style, the chapter titles. I do like all of that. I thought it was really aesthetically pleasing and just something really different. And it fit that kind of darker tone that the show tries to open you up with, that Over the Garden Wall is a sort of unknown, potentially sinister place, and that first episode feels like you're watching a creepy version of Adventure Time or a creepy version of a kids TV show. And then, like you said, episode 2 and 3 opens up and it's like, oh, here's some really warm color palettes and happy stuff. And episode 3 has like really goofy music and slapstick comedy, and so then it's like the tone is just no longer consistent. So you think you're getting set up for this like spooky season style miniseries, and then that's not consistent throughout the rest of the show. And I think that's the biggest problem that I have with this series as a whole, is we have this kind of, we were sold a really dark, spooky environment, and then we don't get that for the rest of the show, except in some small areas. And not that I'm saying you have to be completely dark and depressing and scary for the whole show. You know, you can have moments of levity weaved within, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but it just tonally doesn't feel like it fits. I also wanted to just continue that the cloud dream that Greg has is just so bizarre. I really don't like it. It feels like it's the weirdest change in tone for this show. I don't like how they have this vignette over the where it's like you're looking through a telescope for some parts of it, and then for other parts it's gone back to like the full screen like picture, and then we go back to this like now we're looking through a black hole. Like I really don't like that. I don't understand what that point of that was. The title of that episode is what, like
Into the No, that's episode 9. I don't remember what episode 8 is called.
It's Babes in the Wood, and I was like, is this supposed to be like the movie Babes in Toyland, which I think I saw when I was like 8 years old, and so I don't remember it at all. But I was like, is this supposed to be like an homage to something? I'm just so confused. So just visually, I didn't like that part either. And then again, like you said, there's no contribution really to the overall plot, except that Greg gets told he gets a wish, but then you don't actually get what you really want because, you know, your brother's gone, and actually we're not even going to help you defeat the beast because you're going to still get captured at the end. I mean, it was just like, so even that, you can't even say like visually it was for a purpose, because it really didn't feel like it was for a purpose. I also really don't like the amount of singing that's in this series, and I'm probably going to get a ton of hate for it, but honestly, it's because I think that the majority of the songs, I don't mind that Greg like makes up these silly songs and stuff. I really don't mind that. So when Tori and I were talking about it earlier, that's not what I was saying. I don't mind that Greg comes up with these like silly little ditties along the way, because I think that's pretty accurate to his character. However, the singing that's done by all these other characters just is so bizarre. Like this teacher is singing about alphabet letters, but she's singing about this man that broke her heart. Like, why? It's just out of the blue, and it really doesn't fit the like more serious or darker tone. The frog starts singing, and then he never speaks again for the rest of the show. Like, that made no sense. Even there's one part of the song where it seems like the part where the frog starts singing, I couldn't hear because they have other moments. Maybe it's the sound mixing or people are talking over it. I can't remember exactly, but I thought that he sings at one point. I caught the lyrics that he's singing about over the garden wall. And I'm like, is he singing why this show is called Over the Garden Wall, and like some themes of that are supposed to be the themes of the storyline, and I can't hear or understand the lyrics. Yeah. So what's the point? If somebody worked really hard and wrote this song that's supposed to connect threads of this story, and I can't even understand what the lyrics of the song are. The beast is implied to be singing at some point, and he is singing words, and I can catch snippets of words here and there, and yet I can never hear the words that he's singing. So why do we have that? Why is he singing in that? The part when they're in the tavern and these tavern patrons start singing, this highwayman starts singing, and this guy starts singing about a wedding, and then the tavern owner finally sings something that's relevant about how the beast is at how she's implying that the woodsman is really the beast, that there is no beast. The beast is the one that's whoever's carrying the lantern is the real beast. And now we finally have one song, literally one song out of all the songs in these episodes, one song that actually matters.
Yeah.
And everything else is just ridiculous. And I really have a problem with that. Like, I think music is important to me, and if you like the songs in this episode, that is not a discredit to you. You're welcome to like them, but I feel like if you're working that hard to write a song to help tell the plot of your show or musical or whatever, it should A, tell part of the story, and B, arranged and mixed sound-wise so I can actually hear what people are saying. When the tavern owner was singing the song about that, inferring that the woodsman is actually the beast, Tori couldn't even understand half of the words to the song.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge problem. So
Yeah.
I really disliked the singing in these episodes. And I think that they probably are lyrically written really well. I think the fact that Wirt says these like really poetic things shows that the writing in this series has the potential to be very, very well written and poetically written. So I really don't doubt that the songs that are significant are written very well. I just couldn't hear about half of them. And that really frustrated me. I thought the score, however, was done very nicely. I really liked the score. It really added to kind of the overall theme and like the feel that you were the emotions you're supposed to be feeling based on the way that the woods looked or the way the environment looked or based on what was happening. It felt, dark and ominous when things were supposed to be dark and ominous, and it felt more light and relaxing when you, as a viewer, felt like you could take a breath for a change. I also liked that a lot of the background scenery and backgrounds of different shots are either, if they're not physically, they're at least very stylized in kind of a watercolor style, and I really liked that. I thought that just added to the overall aesthetic of the show. Again, also, I couldn't really give 4 style points, if you will. I didn't feel like I could give a lot of credit because the style doesn't feel very different from something like Adventure Time, which is also a Cartoon Network production. So a lot of the visuals, I think, are pleasing, but I feel like there is a lot of inconsistencies in the overall storytelling, and so those are the biggest reasons that I only gave it half a point out of 2. I did, however, really like the style choices and the visuals in the modern day setting. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really good. It really felt like a Halloween setting. I thought that was a great way to kind of, with your plot, kind of tell why your characters dressed the way they did. Although I didn't understand why Wirt's costume is just this weird amalgamation of stuff he found. And people are like, what are you supposed to be, some kind of gnome? And he's like, I don't know. Like, yeah. Like, oh, come on. Like, you couldn't think of anything. Like, at least Greg had a decent story that he's got a teapot because he's an elephant. Yeah. Like, at least he had something. Like, you couldn't come up with something. Maybe Wirt wanted to dress like a garden gnome or something like that. They clearly picked that visual, like, costume for him before they came up with an explanation for it. And I feel like that could have just you could have done something to kind of explain why he looks the way he looks. Right. But otherwise, I thought everything else was pretty consistent as far as the like character design was. But overall, I think that just tonally it was just very inconsistent, and so it furthered the fact that the plot felt disjointed because visually it looked disjointed as well. And then the singing, I just really didn't like the singing. I really had a problem with it. I did want to mention, though, I picked up on this and I was really puzzled throughout the episode until episode 9, where you find out I really liked that at the at every cue card, there's a train whistle. And I was waiting at every cue, like, title card. I was like, why is there a train whistle? Clearly there's no train, because if there was, they could just take a train to get home.
Right.
But the train whistle was the train that they dodged, which is how they ended up, quote
Falling in the
unquote,
river
over
or
the
whatever.
garden wall. So I liked that they had kind of kept that cohesion throughout the title track versus having some kind of, some other sound effect catered to each episode. So, half a point out of 2 for aesthetics for me.
Okay. And then next category is personal taste and preference. Out of 2 possible points, I gave this 1. I think I was quite entertained. Like, I was having a fine time. Like, this is a show that I would call easy watching. Didn't really require much brain work. It was kind of just one of those things that you could just kind of like sit back and watch. You could probably really easily multitask while you have this on. It's an entertaining show. But it falls so flat comparatively to other shows of its nature. Shows that we've mentioned. I also think that in what it was trying to do, whatever that goal was, since the goal is not clear, I think it's obvious that it falls flat. And so because it falls flat, I just really couldn't give it full points. I feel like if you want something like this, there are better options for you. But if you're just like, well, I don't want to watch something that I've already watched before, and I've already watched other shows that are like this. Okay, that's fine. Like, put it on. It's entertaining. It is an easy watch. Me and Holland watched it in one sitting in like an hour and 40 minutes. Like, it really was not difficult. The whole thing is the length of a feature film. But I really don't have much to say outside of that. There wasn't, do I think I'll watch it again? Maybe. But I don't know if I would seek it out. It's not something that I'm going to go to other friends and be like, oh my gosh, you have to watch this show. Would you watch it with me if I said I wanted to watch this with you? That's not going to be me. I'm not going to be like pushing it. I'm not going to be heavily recommending it to my, to friend circles and things like that. I don't think this is going to be one of those things that I talk to people about. So I don't know. I don't really have much else to say. Just that it was fine. Like, I didn't hate it to the point of not enjoying myself, but I just really think there's so many other better things that you could watch if you want something like this.
Alrighty, I gave this half a point out of 2, and I really do need to preface, I really didn't hate this experience of watching it. I really didn't hate it, but giving it half a point is because I was trying to compare it to other things that I do enjoy, and so it didn't give full points. I wouldn't say that I would rank this equal to things that I enjoy, at a 50% level, so I would say, at maybe half of that is probably appropriate. I really didn't hate it. It was entertaining. It was easy to watch. It was very digestible. I completely agree. I would probably put this on if I was like sick and recovering on the couch and wanted something that if I fell asleep during, it was fine. And if I watched the whole thing, it'd be fine too. So I think it's very easily digestible. It's very entertaining. It's enjoyable to watch, but I really didn't find anything new or interesting or thought-provoking, and I couldn't even find like a moral or a lesson to be learned between all of these episodes, all 10 episodes. For me, the most problematic thing is that Wirt and Greg never really grow or change. It feels like at some points they feel like they're gonna give you this like existential theme, and they don't, or maybe they give you hints at what kind of message they're trying to convey, and then they just never really follow through with it. And so it just feels really unsatisfying ultimately for me as a viewer. I thought that one thing that I kind of wanted to mention back in the plot was I thought that when we found out that Greg and Wirt were actually from modern day and it was Halloween, and you're watching Wirt interact with all his friends, and his perception of his relationship with Sarah and Sarah's relationship with Justin, whatever that guy's name is. And
I don't even remember.
I don't even remember. And his relationship with his friends, and he thinks he's not invited. He can't go into the house party because he wasn't invited. And then he walks in the door and they're like, "Oh, hey, Wirt, how's it going?" Like, his perception of his social group and his friend group is so skewed. I thought, oh, this would be a great way. Start with that.
Yeah.
And then use this whole misadventure he has for him to learn that the way that he sees the world is not an accurate representation of the way the world is. Yeah. That could have been a very great, new, fresh take on kind of a coming of age story, and use Greg as this very childlike innocence that sees the world the way it really is, and sees the world with this light of optimism. And I thought that was, once I saw episode 9, how Wirt has this a little bit of a distorted view of reality, I thought, oh, that would be a great ending, is that this is how Wirt changes. He sees and appreciates a good life and a good world that he lives in and can see it for what it really is. And they didn't even do that. And so because I saw all this potential as we're watching this series, it left me more unsatisfied.
Right.
That you had this great potential and so many nuggets along the way where you could have told a really good story. And instead it was just kind of a mildly entertaining, kids mini series. So that's why I gave it half a point out of 2.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's almost worse when you see glimpses of something that could be great and then they never, happen.
Right.
And it's more disappointing that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, the last category is creativity. Out of 1 point, I struggled with this one more than anything. I ended up settling on half a point, and I think I'm being generous, to be honest. This show is a little unpredictable, which can be attributed to creativity. However, I feel like its unpredictability is not in a way that feels new. It's in a way that feels confusing and unsatisfying. So I really couldn't give it so much credit. Most of my credit is going into, I can tell that effort was made in building the world and the characters within it. It's just unfortunate how disjointed and useless a lot of those world building pieces end up being. They don't actually build the world just because effort was made into them, and they exist in a fun way and creative way. It's just unfortunate. I really think I could have given it full points if all of those incredibly creative characters that we see and the world that they live in were used for something other than just existing. So I think I may still end up being a little generous with half the point, but I didn't think it was so bad that I wanted to give it no points. So I kind of teetered. But really that's what I have to say about that, is just half a point out of 1 for me.
I actually give it 0 out of 1, and I'm going to be the bad cop in this scenario. I think that, kind of like you mentioned, that there are a lot of other works that are very similar to this that do a better job at what this show attempts to do, is the biggest reason that I didn't give it any points. It doesn't do anything new with the animation style. It doesn't do anything new with story. It doesn't do anything new with characters. It doesn't do anything really new with character design. The themes of, 2 kids being lost in the woods, and if you lose hope, that's when you really become lost. I mean, none of that is anything that's really revolutionary. And I think overall it makes good attempts. And I think that because it's so easily digestible in the very short episode form contents, I can see why it's popular. But I wouldn't go as far to say that it's iconic. And maybe I'm way off base here, but to my knowledge, I don't think it has as big of a cult following as some other works that may not be high quality, but may have a huge cult following and have just become almost a meme in the sense of how it's so bad it's good. It didn't
Twilight.
even Yeah.
Sorry.
It didn't even reach that kind of status. So I do see the appeal of why fans of this show are fans, but I don't think that there is a strong enough justification that this has become an iconic piece of media or will become an iconic piece of media or will stand the test of time. So I couldn't even give it really merit for that. So, and then also I kind of feel like if you use the cop-out ending that it was all just a dream and none of it was really real, I feel like you shouldn't get any points for creativity for that, which I know sounds really harsh, because I know a lot of stories use that, but I think at this day and age it's been so overused that you don't get to use it anymore. So 0 out of 1 for creativity for me.
All right.
What's your final score?
My final score is 4.5.
And my final score is 2.
Oof.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's pretty rough.
I hope that the person who wanted us to do this for the podcast isn't like a huge fan.
Yeah. So
if
you're listening, I'm sorry.
That makes it sound like they are.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Alrighty. So, you ready for some lightning round questions?
Yes.
Well, first, did you have any final thoughts?
Oh, no, I said everything I needed to say.
Okay, cool. All right, so did you have a favorite episode?
Probably 9.
Yeah, I think that would be mine too.
Yeah, the one where it shows the real world situation.
Yeah. Okay, do you have a least favorite episode?
8.
Yeah, that was a pretty bad one.
I don't like the weird Cloud City dream.
Yeah.
I didn't like it at all.
I didn't like... Yeah. Yeah. I think... I don't know. I don't even know what I would say is my least favorite episode. What was the episode... What was episode 5? Was that the one where the bird betrays them? Is that in episode 5?
I don't remember.
What was in episode 5? Oh, episode 5. Oh, no.
Episode 5, the Tea Mansion?
The Tea Mansion one. That one was kind of boring. I really didn't like the cloud one, though. I think I'd have to say that one, too.
That one's bad.
I also didn't like the one with the singing teacher.
That was like 3 or something.
Yeah,
3 or 4.
I didn't really like that one either. But I think I'd have to say the Cloud
I think it's 3 because I think 4 is the tavern.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would concur with you on that one. Do you have a favorite character?
I mean, there are characters I like, even though I don't think they lived up to their full potential. So I guess with that disclaimer, I'd probably pick Beatrice. Yeah. I just felt like she was an interesting character, and had a little more depth than some of the other characters did. So, yeah, I'll say Beatrice.
Yeah, I would probably say with that same caveat, I think I would say the Woodsman.
Okay.
What episode do you think was the most useless for the plot? So it may not be your least favorite, but one you thought was just completely useless.
3, the schoolhouse.
Yeah.
The schoolhouse with the singing teacher and the animals, and then they do a benefit concert to raise money for the failing schoolhouse, and it had no bearing on anything else ever.
Yeah.
Nothing happened outside of that. So
yeah.
That's my vote.
I can't think of any episode that's more useless than that one.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, I thought for sure on the episode with the bell was pretty useless too.
I guess so.
I thought in that episode they were going to explain what the little black turtles were. Because the little black turtle was eaten by that dog and it turned into that big monster thing.
True.
And then he spit out the turtle and then Auntie whispers or whatever it is can eat the little black turtles and she doesn't turn into a monster or anything.
She kind of already is one.
I know, but nothing happened when she ate the turtle.
No, I don't know.
I thought for sure these little black turtles were going to be like Venom's like symbiote glue or something.
The T-Mansion episode also doesn't matter.
Well, the horse, they get rid of the horse.
Yeah, but the horse really wasn't useful with the exception of getting him out of the tavern.
Yeah.
Like, they could have dumped the horse anywhere.
They could have just not taken the horse.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are lots of useless episodes.
That is a really sad...
Isn't that sad?
Sad question.
Yeah.
It's very revealing.
Uh-huh.
Least favorite visual. Like, either a character or an environment or, like, a creature design, something like that.
I know which one I'd be happy to never see again, and that's Possessed Lorna. That was spooky as heck.
Yeah.
That was like scariest part of Undertale meets scariest part of Coraline. And I didn't like that. So I'm okay not ever seeing that again.
Yeah. I think the Cloud City was probably still... I really
it was pretty bad.
Like it. Oh, I really didn't like that. And I mean, this is going to sound so picky, but the fact that it kept cutting back and forth between like a regular view and now we're like looking through a telescope. I don't understand that at all. I also really didn't like the little floating like kid angel heads that came down before it.
Yeah,
I really
me
didn't
either.
like that. I probably hated that. Even
That's why
more
I
than
thought he died.
Possessed Lorna.
Yeah.
Those were more horrifying.
They were pretty scary.
They were pretty terrifying. Alrighty. Last lightning round question. What is one change that you would make to the series?
I'd condense the whole thing down into like a 60-minute, maybe even less. Condense. Cut everything useless out, and like and explore the characters deeper. Please. Those would be my changes.
Yeah. I would have changed the plot to reflect like kind of what I mentioned about how I think Wirt has this false perception of his world and his relationship with his friends, and like he's not this loser that nobody likes. Like he clearly has like friends and people that like him and people that are interested in him, and you know, he doesn't have this like bitter rivalry with somebody else, and the girl that he likes actually likes him back and thinks he's interesting, and his poetry and clarinet playing is valued by other people. And so I think that you can keep the plot, you know, this over the garden wall, you can keep it a little metaphorical if you want to, but make it so that that aspect of him changes because of his journey into this other world, if you will. And I would absolutely take out the "it was all a dream" thing. I would take that out completely.
Gosh, yeah.
Like, your audience isn't so unable to suspend their disbelief.
Yeah.
Like, Marvel superhero movies are some of the most profitable movies on the planet, and we know that those people aren't walking around.
Yeah.
Like, so let them go to some crazy, weird, fantastical world that's just over the garden wall. Like, you know, Narnia. Hello. Like, it's been a story
Alice in
forever.
Wonderland.
Yeah.
You know?
Not anything that your audience can't handle. So
I guess Alice in Wonderland was also all a dream, so maybe that was a bad example.
Was it, though?
I guess it's never really explained. She just wakes up with Dinah at the end.
Because through the looking glass.
Oh, true.
Afterwards, they go through the looking glass.
Maybe it was a fine example.
So, alrighty. Any final thoughts?
Nope. Sorry for eviscerating this.
I know. This was
It's not like me to really
spicy.
do that much.
Yeah. It's an intense. This is a Lion and Mouse commentary first. Tori giving a
I don't think
sad
it's
score.
not my lowest score though. I have lower scores for some of the Twilight films.
Oh, that's true. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. We hope you had a good time. If you did or didn't, feel free to tell us why. Connect with us on our socials or our website. You can also find links to our show notes, Patreon, and a suggestion box on our website at lionandmousepodcast.com. If you want, you can review this episode on whatever podcast platform you prefer and let us know what you think. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you in the next one.